I'm Danny from DKT Academy. In this video I want to cover a few basic stretches, go through them in detail just to understand how to use them better and of course avoid risk of injury. So please, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, let's jump in. So this is a hamstring stretch I use quite often if I'm feeling rather tense or just kind of like an active rest day. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our feet shoulder width apart. We're going to be just gentle on the knees so we don't have to have our legs locked out or anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to tilt our hips back as well. So from the side, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my bum out. And the reason for that is that when I start leaning forward, it doesn't make me just arch my back straight away. So from this position, I've stick my bum out. I'm going to lean forward as much as I can with a straight back until I feel a stretch. And then I'm going to come straight back up. So essentially we're just feeling that stretch and then coming back up. So from here, I'm going to lean forward and then straight back up. To change the stretch and amplify the intensity of it a little bit, what you can do is if you've got something like any weights or mats on the ground, essentially you can put the balls of your feet onto whatever's in front of you, basically putting your ankles at a greater degree, and then we can repeat the same thing. So again, sticking our bum out, keeping gentle on the knees, so not locked out, come down, and then back up. It's quite surprising how intense that stretch can get because you're raising the balls of your feet higher than your ankles. So play around with it, I'm sure you'll find something that challenges you. For a much more active stretch, we're going to take the hamstring stretch to one leg. So this is great because we're working within the stretched range that we've got, that we'll be feeling, and then we're working on our balance as well. So from here we're going to take one foot and the foot that is supporting us is going to stay straight. From here we're going to lift the back leg up and we're going to allow ourselves to tilt forward. Keep this leg straight that we're standing on. We're going to allow our back leg to come up at the same time as our body comes down. If you want to put your hands out for balance, or if you wanted to touch the ground if you're flexible enough, as long as you're not arching over, as long as your back is straight, or again if you wanted to build up. And what we want to make sure is we want to make sure our hips are staying square to the floor and we're not opening them up. You can see it's a much more challenging stretch. It's fun and infuriating at times, but it is a good stretch, and like I said, you're working within that flexibility, which is even better. One of my favourite hamstring stretches by far is this. So we're going to start with our feet somewhat close together, and we're going to bend our knees again, just light on our knees so that our legs don't have to be locked out, and we're going to tilt our bum back as well, so posterior tilts. So again, the reason for that is that when I start leaning forward, that I'm not just arching over, that I'm actually keeping my back straight up until I feel a stretch. So sticking our bum out, we're going to keep our back straight up until we feel that stretch, and that's when we can relax and curve our backs down. And of course from here we can just hang out whilst we feel that stretch. Once we're in this position and we're down into the stretch, what I would tend to do is I tend to move around to the side, hold it there for a little bit, just as long as I want, come back to the centre, and then move around to the other side as well. Back to the centre and back up. Now there's a few variations with this. So if we can't quite reach the ground yet, if we've got any kind of blocks or weights built up or anything just like this, we can start doing the same kind of thing. So tilting our bum back, keeping our back straight up until we feel that stretch, and then we can curl down and just place our hands on something like this. So this is a good idea if we're just kind of getting used to this, but it's also a good idea to kind of like refer back to it sometimes, just have a bit of a play around with the variations that we've got. So from here, like I said, we can just relax. What we can also do is trying to keep our hips in the same position, so essentially we're not trying to let them rise as we lift our feet up. We can lift our feet so our heels are off the floor, and we can relax there. And then we can do the alternate, which is bring the balls of our feet off, so we feel more of an intense hamstring stretch. And if we want to, we can just gently and slowly alternate between them as well. Once we get used to that stretch, if we're a little bit more advanced or we've just got used to that, what we can do, of course, we can just take it to the floor. So doing the same thing before, placing our hands down and raising the heels, and then raising the toes, or again alternating between the two. So it doesn't matter if your palms are flat, if you're on your fist, if you're just about touching the floor with your fingers. Of course you're going to feel a comfortable position and something that's going to challenge you. If we're finding any kind of difficulty or we're just not as flexible with what we did with the last stretch for our hamstrings, there is a variation where we can essentially start from the ground, placing our hands on the ground, and we can change the way that our feet and our legs are working to kind of get the same benefit and to work towards what we were just doing. So if we wanted to place our hands on the floor, if we started wider, say double shoulder width apart, then we can work on basically keeping our hands on the ground, whether it's your fingertips or your hands, and we can slowly just work our feet in. Now, with any kind of straddle or box splits, naturally the wider that we go, the less it demands of our hamstrings. So if we think about that and we work it in reverse, then the wider we start out, the closer we can bring our legs in to work on our hamstring flexibility, if we're finding that our hamstrings just aren't quite as flexible as our adductors, abductors, basically surrounding muscles. So you'll see so far the reason that we've been stood up doing all the hamstring stretches is because we're working with gravity, so it's putting a lot less additional stress onto our lower back. If we're sitting and we're reaching towards our feet or something past our feet, we will be putting stress onto our back, and you'll probably be able to feel the difference if you try it. The reason that we sat down for things like a straddle is because the wider we go, the less it demands of our hamstrings, so as long as we're sat past our hips, then we're not going to feel that. That being said, it doesn't mean that all hamstring stretches on the floor are bad. Of course, it's just pays to be aware of our body and just to understand how we can use the stretches to have a more positive effect. So commonly we'd find that once people are in this position, they'll reach forward, and it's then that they'll feel the tension on the back, or even if you're not as flexible, reaching towards the shins. So what we can do instead is, whether it's both feet out or just one, we can start with our legs bent and we can go to the position where we'd normally feel the stretch up to. So commonly it's either the last muscle that is activated or the weakest spot that we're going to feel it. So naturally, when we're leaning forward towards the legs, our legs are already locked out, so our hamstrings are engaged. It's going to be our lower back that is the last muscle activated, so that's why most people tend to feel it in that area. Whereas if we do the opposite, let's say that we can go to our shins comfortably, or just a little bit past our comfort zone, what we can do here is we can work on moving the feet forward, and because the hamstrings, the legs are the last thing engaged, that's the stretch that you're going to feel. Your hamstrings are muscles that everyone uses often. Well, not yours, but you get the idea. So don't worry if it takes you a lot longer to become more flexible than what you might expect. I've certainly got a lot of goals that I still want to achieve with my stretching, and so the best thing you can do is just enjoy it as much as possible. So please hit that subscribe button, throw me a like. If you've got any comments or questions, comment below, and I'll see you next time.